A woman was belittled and humiliated in the middle of the office by her arrogant coworkers. But what they didn't know was that just minutes later, the most powerful man in the city would walk in and make them pay the price. Is that thrift store chic or a fashion experiment gone wrong? Jessica's voice rang across the bullpen like a silver fork, scraping porcelain sharp, deliberate, and just loud enough. Scarlett Jones didn't flinch. She kept her gaze on the spreadsheet in front of her, the numbers forming tidy columns of calm in a room that reeked of tension and designer perfume. The hum of monitors, the faint tapping of fingers on mechanical keyboards, the click of patent leather heels on linoleum. Everything felt timed, measured, rehearsed. Everything except her. She'd arrived at NASA's Marshall office barely 3 weeks ago, and already the quiet scorn had begun to bloom like mildew on wet drywall. Her cardigan gray stretched at the sleeves soft with wear was a regular point of commentary. So was the canvas tote bag with the faded bookstore logo she carried in place of the monogrammed leather briefcases favored by her peers. Scarlett had never tried to fit in. She preferred structure to small talk, algorithms to office gossip. She liked things that made sense, and the way Jessica Hughes looked at her, head tilted and smile tight. "Didn't, Jones?" Jessica called again, drawing the attention of two colleagues pretending to scroll through reports. "You left your lunch in the fridge? Or is that quinoa mess some kind of experiment?" A thin trickle of laughter followed, polite and poisoned. Scarlett stood slowly, brushing a crease from her skirt. She said nothing. Her silence was her armor, a fragile kind to be sure, but hers. At 29, Scarlett was lean, bookish, with a refined posture and a quiet way of walking that made people assume she lacked a spine. Her dark auburn hair was pinned in a low, practical twist, her hands long-fingered and steady-moved with the kind of purpose that rarely drew eyes, unless you were paying attention. Most people weren't. The room pulsed with muted derision. Jessica, in her scarlet blazer and stilettos, didn't bother hiding her smirk. She'd led the acquisition strategy team for 5 years, and her circle included others like her polished, poised, and fluent in sarcasm. Scarlett was not one of them. She didn't drink during Friday happy hours. She didn't post filtered selfies from conference events. She didn't laugh on cue. She worked, but competence. Scarlett was learning did not earn favor here. The rules were unwritten and deeply embedded style over substance, charm over credibility. And women like Jessica played them flawlessly, back at her desk. Scarlett pulled up the latest trajectory models for a Mars logistics array. Her project. She was lead analyst, though no one referred to her as such, unless it was buried in a line item. She double-checked the delta V values, ignoring the whisper behind her. Do you think she even has a social life? Like outside of spreadsheets, she could feel it. Then the ache creeping up her neck, the quiet burn behind her eyes. She didn't cry. That was her one rule. If they wanted to see her break, they'd be waiting a long time. "Hey," came a lower voice, hesitant but nearby. It was Greg Sanders, junior systems engineer, clean-cut, forgettable, with a habit of blinking too much when nervous. "You okay?" Scarlett glanced up. His kindness felt like a crack in drywall, unplanned, dangerous. "I'm fine," she said. Greg nodded, but the worry in his face lingered. "They can be a lot." Scarlett's lips curved ever so slightly. "That's generous." Before he could respond, the automatic doors opened with a hiss. Director Langston stepped out from his glass-walled office. Gray suit, impeccable, his expression unreadable. A hush fell across the bullpen. Jessica straightened, smoothing her blouse like it mattered. Langston said nothing to her. Instead, he walked past her desk and paused at Scarlett's. "Jones," he said, "I've forwarded you the parameters for the propulsion recalibration. We'll need your analysis by Monday." Scarlett met his eyes. "Understood." He nodded once and walked away. Just like that, the silence fractured. Jessica turned to Lauren, another high-heeled lieutenant in her court, and whispered something under her breath. Scarlett didn't have to hear it to know. She turned back to her screen where the numbers waited. They always made sense. They never asked why she dressed the way she did, or why she stayed late, or why she never mentioned family or friends. They didn't care, but Scarlett did have someone. She reached into her tote and pulled out a small brass locket, tucked it beneath her collar where it always rested against her skin. No one in the office had seen it. No one knew its weight, but she felt it every day. Cool, constant, silent. Numbers weren't the only thing she was hiding. The coffee was still warm when it spilled across the spreadsheet. A slow tide of dark liquid crawled toward the printed data, bleeding the ink into gray clouds. Scarlett stared for a breath, then reached for a stack of napkins blotting the corner. First, always start from the edges. Stop the spread. Across from her, Mark leaned against the divider between their desks, mug in hand, a crooked smile pulling at his mouth. "Oops," he said, too casual. "Didn't see that there." The room didn't laugh, at least not out loud, but she could hear it in the shuffle of feet. The darted glances, the way Lauren raised her phone just enough to capture the scene without being obvious. Jessica hadn't looked up from her laptop. She didn't have to. The damage had already been done. Scarlett pressed her thumb into a particularly wet blot, folding the napkin to hide the stain. Her face was calm, almost detached, but her fingers trembled under the desk, twitching slightly, as if they belonged to someone else. The napkins were thin, useless. She needed to reprint the entire report. Mark's voice dropped an octave low enough to cut, but not enough for HR mics to catch. "Careful, Jones. Paper doesn't grow on trees." She didn't respond. Silence had become her armor, but it wasn't just armor anymore. It was a prison, and each time she refused to speak, the walls closed in a little more. Later that morning, the conference room was already half full when Scarlett slipped inside, clutching a fresh copy of the analysis. The air reeked of strong perfume and burnt espresso. Jessica stood near the whiteboard, gesturing with polished nails as she rattled off numbers Scarlett had compiled the night before. "Our team." Jessica began pointedly excluding Scarlett. With a sweep of her eyes, has modeled 3 scenarios for the next phase of satellite relay. You'll see in the projections. Scarlett sat at the far end of the table beside the window, hands folded neatly on her lap. Her cardigan was dry now, but the faint scent of coffee still clung to the fibers. Brian Foster entered last tie, slightly askew eyes already scanning for who to challenge. Jessica finished stepping aside like a performer waiting for applause. Brian looked over the papers, tapping one with a pen. "These calculations are conservative." He didn't raise his voice. He never did. But there was something in the way he emphasized the word flat dismissive, like a diagnosis. Jessica spoke again, light as sugar. "We were trying to keep it accessible." Scarlett led the data prep. "Maybe she didn't realize we could have gone bolder?" Brian barely turned. "That true. Jones." Playing it safe again. Her voice was steady but quiet. "I modeled based on mission tolerances. The risk margin's already at 12%. He waved a hand, already bored. "We're not here to coddle numbers. We're here to push boundaries." The silence was louder than any shout. Scarlett watched the corner of the table where the varnish had chipped away to reveal the raw wood beneath honest exposed. She understood that kind of wear. After the meeting, as chairs scraped back and the hum of conversation resumed, Lauren passed behind her, whispering near her ear, "Maybe try smiling next time. Might make them go easier on you." Scarlett didn't move, didn't speak, just gripped the locket beneath her collar. It burned cold today. By late afternoon, a photo had surfaced, her hunched at her desk, blurry but identifiable. It was posted on an anonymous office meme account. The caption read, "Budget Barbie strikes again. Anyone got a spare coupon for a life upgrade?" She found it by accident, scrolling through the feed while waiting for a render. 42 likes in the first hour. 2 laughing emojis in the comments. One was from someone on the 10th floor. She didn't know his name. She locked her phone and set it face down. Her throat felt tight. Not like crying, just tight. As if her own voice was stuck somewhere deep and couldn't crawl out. She pushed her chair back slowly and walked toward the break room. The light in there was dimmer, less fluorescent. A small relief. She stood by the sink, running cold water over her hands, letting the sting ground her. Behind her, a voice came. Not mocking, not familiar. Why do you let them? Greg. Again, his eyes were too kind for this place. Scarlett dried her hands on a brown paper towel, folding it 3 times before dropping it in the bin. Because I'm still deciding if they're worth the sound of my voice. He blinked, opened his mouth, then closed it. Some things, she added, only look weak until they break something. Greg gave a slow nod, unsure whether it was meant as warning or confession. Scarlett left before he could ask more. Scarlett returned to her desk just before 4, her cardigan damp at the sleeves from the break room sink. The office light had changed by then, no longer sharp and fluorescent, but tinged with the golden fatigue of late afternoon. The air felt heavier, as if it too were holding its breath. She settled into her chair, fingers curling over the mouse, the hum of the monitor returning like static after a storm. Her mind drifted to the locket against her collarbone, its brass surface now warm from her skin, steady, familiar. It grounded her when everything else around her refused to stay still. Jessica's voice floated over the partition. "Hey, Mark," she said, tone sweet but soaked in vinegar. "I think someone forgot to rinse their cottage cheese this morning." Scarlett didn't react. Her screen displayed a set of code she'd been troubleshooting all week, small errors tucked like splinters into dense systems. She exhaled through her nose, calm, methodical. Then came the hiss of carbonation, loud and close. A second later, something cold slapped against her shoulder and exploded. The soda burst over her blouse, soaking into the fabric and trailing sticky lines down her side. The can clattered onto her desk, spinning once before settling against her keyboard. Gasps echoed, a low, startled chuckle. Scarlett froze. The scent of syrup and artificial lime filled her nostrils. Her blouse clung to her ribs. The silence that followed was worse than the laughter. It was anticipation. "Oops," Jessica chirped from the next aisle, already mid-smirk. "Didn't see your arm there. Reflexes like that, you'd never survive in ops." Scarlett stood slowly, one hand gripping the desk for balance. Her other hovered mid-air, suspended between dignity and collapse. Soda dripped from her sleeve, pooling at her wrist. Her breath came shallow but steady. Mark pulled out his phone, elbowing Lauren as he framed the shot. "Gotta document the casualties," he joked. Lauren snorted, tragic. "She really should have invested in waterproof fabric." Brian Foster emerged from his office, coffee in hand. Eyes glazed from one meeting too many. He paused at the sight, lips pressing into a line that might have meant disapproval if it had meant anything at all. His gaze flicked to Scarlett, then to Jessica. "Accident?" he asked. Jessica tilted her head, mock contrite. "Entirely." Soda slipped. Brian made a show of sighing. "Just clean it up." "All right, we've got the departmental debrief in 30. He disappeared back into his office. Scarlett looked at the floor. The soda was creeping toward the base of her chair, darkening the carpet. Thread by thread, she could feel the room watching. Not helping, just watching. She gathered her things, slow, deliberate. She did not speak. She did not cry. In the break room, she wrung her sleeve over the sink, the fabric too wet to salvage. Her reflection in the vending machine glass showed no emotion. Just a woman in soaked clothes, her hair frizzing at the edges, her composure held together by threads. She pulled her phone from her bag and hesitated. Her thumb hovered over the contact list, over the name she hadn't dared press for weeks. Nathan Pierce. Scarlett stared at it, her jaw tight. Her wedding ring remained at home, tucked in a dish by the sink. She hadn't worn it to the office since the first week. It was easier this way, cleaner. She thought of the last time she saw him. His voice over breakfast, quiet, concerned. "You don't have to fight alone," he'd said. She'd nodded. She hadn't believed him. But now, drenched in soda and silence, she realized the line had shifted. This wasn't about endurance anymore. This was about what was left after the dam broke. She tapped the name. It rang once. Scarlett. Nathan's voice was immediate, deep with concern. "Are you all right?" She swallowed hard. "I need you." A pause. "Where are you?" "At the office." His voice changed, still calm but colder now, steel threading through velvet. "Don't move," he said. "I'm on my way." The call ended. Scarlett stared at the black screen for a moment, her reflection faint and warped in the glass. She tucked the phone back into her tote, then reached up and adjusted the brass locket at her collar. The chain felt heavier than usual, or maybe she was just tired of carrying everything alone. The elevator dinged once. It was a clean, unassuming sound, but the hush it summoned settled over the bullpen like dust before a storm. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Fingers stilled over keyboards. Even the office printer, which had been sputtering out a multi-page briefing, whined to a stop. Scarlett didn't turn. She stood at the far end of the open space, eyes fixed ahead. Her cardigan was still damp, the soda clinging like a second skin. Her posture didn't waver, but beneath her collar, the brass locket rested motionless now, its once warm weight turned cold as stone. The air shifted. Nathan Pierce stepped out of the elevator with quiet, deliberate steps, 6'2" of immaculate calm, in a charcoal suit that didn't so much fit as it did declare. His presence carved a path through the room like the prow of a ship. He didn't rush. He didn't look around. He only had eyes for one person. Scarlett saw his reflection first in the darkened glass of the wall across from her. His jaw was set, his stride even. Behind him, the door shut with a soft pneumatic hiss, sealing the room into a bubble where no one dared to breathe. Jessica's laughter had just begun to rise when it caught in her throat. She stood frozen halfway through adjusting her blazer, a smile hanging awkwardly at the edge of her lips. Mark lowered his phone. Lauren's hand dropped to her side, her phone screen still open to the camera. Brian stepped out of his office, adjusting his tie with mechanical fingers. "Mr. Pierce, we weren't expecting." Nathan didn't slow. He reached Scarlett's desk and stopped, his hand brushing her shoulder. Light reassuring, the kind of touch that carried weight in silence. "Scarlett," he said, "you ready to go?" She looked up at him. Then, for a moment, the soundless chaos faded. The chatter, the stares, the mockery, all of it peeled away. She gave a small nod. "Just a minute." Her voice soft and composed, carried farther than it should have. It landed differently now, somehow firmer. Jessica stepped forward with a bright, polished smile. "Mr. Pierce, I didn't realize you knew Scarlett." "I'm Jessica," account lead for Nathan turned. His expression didn't shift, but the pause in the room deepened. He spoke evenly, his voice resonant without force. "Someone's been giving my wife a hard time." The word wife cracked through the air like gunfire in a chapel. Scarlett didn't react. She stayed seated quiet, but no longer invisible. Jessica paled. Mark looked as though the floor had given out beneath him. Lauren took a step back. Brian cleared his throat. "Sir, surely there's been a misunderstanding." Nathan's tone never rose. That somehow made it worse. "I don't misunderstand harassment." Brian blinked rapidly. There was no formal complaint filed. "She shouldn't have had to file one," Nathan said. "You're her superior. Or were. You've had weeks to notice what was happening here. You chose not to." He turned slightly, addressing no one and everyone. "She didn't want this. She wanted to work. That's all." Jessica's voice cracked like ice underfoot. "We didn't know she was..." "Why should that matter?" Nathan asked, his eyes slicing through the pretense. "Is respect only earned through wealth? Would you have treated her differently if she wore a different watch? A different name?" No one answered. Mark opened his mouth, then shut it. Lauren stared down at her shoes. Scarlett stood at last. Not to interrupt, not to defend. She simply picked up her tote, slipping the strap over her shoulder. Her fingers brushed the locket beneath her collar. Steady now, cool against her skin. Nathan looked to her. You want to stay here? Scarlett met his gaze. No. He nodded once, then turned back to the room. Jessica Hayes, Mark Bennett, Lauren, Kim, Brian, Foster. You're done here. Jessica's voice shot up sharp with desperation. You don't have the authority. I own the board that owns this building, Nathan said, still calm. I have the authority to decide who stays under its roof. Brian stumbled forward, palms out. Mr. Pierce, I've been here nearly 10 years. And in that time, Nathan cut in. You failed the one employee who asked for nothing but decency. You watched it happen. You let it spread. Jessica moved toward Scarlett's desk, eyes wide and gleaming. You think you're better than us now, hiding behind him like you earned it? Scarlett didn't flinch. Nathan raised a hand. Enough. She doesn't owe you an explanation. Security arrived as if summoned by silence itself. 2 suited guards with earpieces stepping in without flourish. Mark's voice cracked as he protested. Lauren whispered something under her breath. Jessica swore, but her voice was swallowed by the weight of the room. They were led out one by one. Scarlett stood beside her husband, watching the door shut behind them. She felt no triumph, only release. The automatic doors hissed shut behind them. Silence held the room in place, thick and uneasy. Scarlett didn't glance back, not at the stunned faces of her co-workers, not at the empty desks where cruel laughter once lived, not at the ghosts of humiliation still clinging to the walls. She adjusted the strap of her tote, tucked a damp strand of hair behind her ear, and walked forward. Nathan kept pace beside her. His steps, even his presence, a quiet wall between her and the world. Outside, the afternoon had slipped into early evening, the light ambered and soft. The sidewalk still hummed with the life of the city. Cars whispering past horns in the distance, people bustling with coffee cups and briefcases, and voices full of tomorrow. Scarlett breathed it in like a first breath after water. They reached the car without speaking. Inside, the city melted into streaks of motion through the window. Nathan drove without haste, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the console where her fingers found his. Their hands touched, not in the way of ownership, but in quiet recognition. Only when they turned into the underground lot beneath their building did he speak. You don't have to explain. Scarlett glanced at him. I wasn't going to. He smiled faintly. Didn't think so. They entered the penthouse just as dusk began to bleed into the skyline. Scarlett slipped out of her shoes and cardigan, placing them neatly on the bench near the door. Her blouse was still stiff with dried soda, and the faint stickiness clung to her wrists. Nathan watched her for a moment, then stepped into the kitchen and returned with a warm towel. You're not a damsel, he said, handing it to her, but I've waited all day to be useful. She chuckled quietly. You're plenty useful, just not always where people can see it. On the balcony, the city sprawled beneath them, glittering and oblivious. Scarlett stood with her arms wrapped around herself, towel abandoned on the railing. Her hair unpinned, now moved gently with the wind. Nathan stepped up behind her, not pressing too close. You were right, she said finally. They didn't break me. She paused, but I think they thought they had. You let them think so. Scarlett nodded. I needed time to decide what I wanted. He rested his hand lightly on her back. And now I want peace, she said. Not payback, not even justice. Just peace. Nathan nodded slowly, his voice lower now. Peace isn't always quiet, Scarlett. Sometimes it comes after a storm. She turned to face him. In the golden wash of the city lights, her face held no makeup, no practiced mask, only clarity. You never asked me why I kept your name out of that place. I didn't need to, he said. You wanted to be seen for who you were, not what you had. Scarlett's fingers moved to the chain at her neck. She pulled the brass locket free, letting it catch the light. They didn't know what this was, she said, but it reminded me. He touched the locket gently. Of what? Of what matters, she whispered. Of where I come from, of who I built myself to be. They stood in silence, then the kind of silence that holds more than words ever could. In the days that followed, the storm traveled fast. A post appeared on LinkedIn written in a tearful tone by Jessica Hughes, citing emotional misunderstanding and miscommunication among team members. The comments, however, were less forgiving. Former colleagues chimed in, some with awkward jokes, others with quiet condemnation. A handful of screenshots made their rounds. Mark updated his resume 3 times in a week, each version more inflated than the last. Word traveled through the industry like wildfire, avoid him. Bad press, bad baggage. Lauren vanished from social media altogether. Her influencer brand, once built on curated photos and corporate affiliations, crumbled when no one was left to sponsor the shine. Brian Foster didn't speak publicly. He simply disappeared from the directory, his name erased from the company's internal system overnight. Someone said they saw him at a small co-working space on the South Side, applying for freelance consulting jobs. No one saw Scarlett at NASA again. She didn't need to go back. Instead, she took a small desk in a quiet cafe downtown, one with floor-to-ceiling windows and soft jazz in the background. She helped local startups streamline their data systems, taught 2 community workshops, and found herself smiling more than she used to. Her reputation began to rebuild, not as someone's wife, not as a scandalous footnote, but as a woman who had chosen to walk away with her dignity intact. The morning sun spilled through the tall cafe windows like honey, soft and unrushed. Scarlett stirred a spoonful of cream into her coffee, watching the swirl settle into a warm amber. Around her, the day was beginning with a hum of familiarity. The clink of cups, quiet greetings, laptops flipping open like birds stretching their wings. Her corner table was tucked near the back where she could see everything without being seen too easily. That was how she liked it. Not hidden, just not on display. The spreadsheet open in front of her showed projections for a nonprofit tech co-op on the South Side, a small earnest project with more heart than funding. She liked working with people who built things from scratch. Not just because it reminded her of herself, but because they understood value in ways that had nothing to do with price tags. The bell above the cafe door jingled and she glanced up. Nathan walked in, a paper bag in hand, tie loosened just enough to prove the morning hadn't consumed him yet. He spotted her instantly and offered a quiet smile, the kind that wasn't meant for anyone else. "You forget breakfast?" he said, setting the bag down with a soft rustle. Again. "I didn't forget," she replied, closing her laptop. "I just deprioritized." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling it now?" She grinned, pulling out the warm croissant he'd brought. "It sounds more productive than skipped." They sat in a comfortable hush, the kind that only forms when 2 people have nothing to prove to each other. Nathan didn't ask about her clients. She didn't ask about his meetings. But when she handed him a printed brochure for her upcoming workshop, Women in STEM Building Without Permission, he took it without a word and slipped it into his jacket pocket, like something sacred. "I got an email this morning," she said, breaking the croissant in half. "A woman from Atlanta. Said she saw the video of the conference and read the article I wrote. She's starting her own consulting firm. Said I made her believe she could." Nathan leaned back in his chair. "That makes 2 of you." Scarlett didn't speak for a moment. She took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth linger. "I never wanted attention," she said. "Not really." "I know," Nathan said. "You wanted clarity and you found it." Outside the window, the city moved like a tide, steady, indifferent. But Scarlett didn't feel small anymore. She felt placed. Over the next several months, her work grew, but never outgrew her. She said no more than she said yes. She chose clients who respected timelines and paid fairly. She prioritized projects that aligned with her quiet sense of purpose. Her desk in the cafe remained her anchor, surrounded by noise, but her own articles began to circulate. A few invitations followed, first for panels, then for keynotes. People were surprised when she showed up without a power suit or dramatic earrings. She wore her usual cardigans, sometimes a simple dress, and always, always the brass locket. "I don't speak for all women," she would say during interviews. "I only speak as one who chose silence until it stopped serving her." She didn't name names, she didn't point fingers, but everyone who needed to understand did. Her former colleagues faded into the backdrop of other people's cautionary tales. Jessica's profile remained inactive. Mark cycled through jobs like loose change. Lauren reappeared on social media, this time selling candles and healing vibes. Brian was a whisper in some HR thread, no longer the man behind a desk. But Scarlett, she became something. None of them expected a reference point. One evening, the wind was crisp but kind, as Scarlett and Nathan sat on the balcony of their penthouse. The city shimmered below like a field of stars caught in motion. Above them, the sky had settled into a peaceful shade of ink. Scarlett rested her head against Nathan's shoulder, her feet tucked beneath her. He held her hand, thumb tracing lazy arcs over her knuckles. "Do you ever wonder?" she asked, if it was too much. He looked at her gently. "What?" "Walking in there, telling the truth, delivering consequences that big," she said. "That public." Nathan's voice was low. "They weren't consequences I invented, Scarlett. I just made sure they caught up with the people who earned them." She nodded slowly. "It still feels enormous sometimes." "The shift. You didn't burn anything down," he said. "You stepped away from a place that had already set fire to itself." Scarlett smiled, eyes distant. "I never needed revenge. I only needed to stop pretending I didn't deserve better." She reached for her locket and let it rest open in her palm. Inside, a tiny photograph faded at the corners but still clear. Her at 21, standing in front of a library with a stack of books nearly toppling in her arms. "I was so unsure then," she said. "So eager to be liked, so afraid of being noticed for the wrong reasons." And now Nathan asked. She closed the locket with a soft click. "Now I'd rather be respected than liked, and I'm no longer afraid of being noticed." They sat in silence after that, letting the night settle around them like a blanket. She had stepped into the storm, endured it, and emerged not with scorched edges, but with a quiet, unshakable light. Scarlett Jones had never needed to win. She had only needed to be free. Scarlett's journey is a powerful reflection of resilience, self-worth, and quiet strength. From enduring workplace cruelty in silence to reclaiming her dignity without bitterness. Her transformation is subtle yet profound. What makes her story remarkable is not a dramatic revenge, but the steady choice to rise with grace. She doesn't need validation through power or wealth, only clarity and self-respect. Nathan's unwavering support reminds us that true love uplifts rather than rescues, and strength doesn't always roar, it often whispers. The brass locket becomes a symbol of identity, quietly grounding her through chaos. This story teaches that one's value isn't defined by titles, appearances, or how loudly they speak. Sometimes the most human thing we can do is choose to walk away, not with vengeance, but with peace. It's a deeply moving tale of empowerment, reminding us that dignity, when protected, can become a form of quiet justice. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share it. Leave a comment to tell us how it inspired you, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. May God bless you and be with you every step of the way.